in this house. The most dire, horrible events took place.
We are not content with the stories. Slice the lives come. Be my victim.
Through watching scenes of violence, through watching scenes of transgression, through watching scenes of horror. There's an enormous amount of sort of abattoir of excess.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
Good evening, chat. How are you? How are you? Ooh. We are once again, me and Waifu, covering a film in this fantastic Women's Month of Double Feature Horror Show. And hello, Mr. GB. I've seen a very interesting question asked in the chat. No, not that one. Live chat, what are you doing? Don't move that quickly. That's the question that's interesting. Yes, absolutely. Definitely me. How about you, Waifu?
I don't know whether my anxiety gets soothed by horror. Probably yes. Well, horror, tense films, it's a nice distraction. Like I had a sort of difficult period a few years ago, at which point Proper Horror Show introduced me to Game of Thrones. And now genuinely the Game of Thrones soundtrack is something that I find truly soothing and makes me feel like the world's going to be okay. So given that was the first series back when all your favourites would get stabbed within 5 minutes, I'm not sure that's the best response to the Game of Thrones theme tune. Game of Thrones. But apparently, yeah. I don't know if that's horror, but yeah, sort of that tension, drama.
Yeah. I usually find it relaxing, except, well, I was going to talk about this anyway. We don't have a topic tonight, but I tried watching a horror movie on Tuesday. And guys, I know this might sound weird, but watching the horror movie really scared me.
No, really?
This doesn't usually happen.
To be fair.
I watched a film from 2018 by the name of Possum. Written and directed by Matthew Holness, known for Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
What?
But seriously, yeah. A cult horror. The guy showed up in a serious role in The Haunting of Bly Manor, and that was weird enough. And then I find out he makes Possum in 2018. Now, we were going to watch that for Halloween last year, and you saw the spiders on the poster. Spider's legs, and you just said nope.
Absolutely not.
And that was a good choice. I've been meaning to watch it. I watched it Tuesday and it messed me up. That film is a little too effective. It is psychological horror. It is very intense. It's not really surprising. You basically know where it's going immediately. It doesn't stop it being absolutely terrifying. So you gave me an excuse to talk about it. If you want a quick recommendation, folks, Possum. But be warned, it's incredibly unpleasant. I felt like I had marathoned The Innocents, Dead Man's Shoes, 1 Hour Photo, and Martyrs. I felt like I'd just gone on that kind of binged, and I was exhausted. Ugh.
Maggie, if arachnophobia features spiders, which I'm guessing by that name it probably does, that's a heckin' large no from me.
Yeah.
I can just about cope with encountering a spider in the garden calmly now, but any kind of creepy film spiders still freak me out, and there are still the occasions when I need to get Chloe in to deal with spiders.
Yeah, I am delegated spider duty frequently anyway. So I'm seeing good regular people. So hello M, hello 70 Sue, good to see you. Margaret, I saw you. Alabaster, hi, Mr. GB.
You can't see it, but she
Maverick?
did just wave.
It made sense to me. So it's because I don't have the camera on. Anyway, Mima, Needle and Fur, good to see. Good to see. All right, folks. So a little catch up before we get into it. I wanted to talk about Possum anyway. I recommend it if you want something absolutely traumatically effective in the psychological horror stakes. We've got that covered. I also wanted to say that last week I premiered the video on Get Out that I've been working on for a while. I was really nervous as to how that would be received. You know, Get Out is a bit of an inflammatory film to talk about. It's a little divisive. People have some strong opinions on it, and I was not coming at it with either of the angles that people tend to talk about. So as I say in the intro, basically, people either tend to talk about Get Out as in what it's saying about white people and all that stuff, or they talk about it as a very social messaging, conscious awareness raising thing they're really positive about it. And I had just a completely different angle on it. I sort of cover bits of those, but it's not the meat of the video. And when I was doing the research for it, a lot of what Jordan Peele was saying about the movie was really backing me up, which is absolutely fantastic. You might be interested to know when I tend to do these videos, I rarely look for interviews first. I tend to just go off the film. I deep dive into that, and I try and work out what I think the film is saying before I supplement it by actually hearing from the people who made the film. What do you think of that approach, Waifu?
It's very like Cambridge literary criticism. Look at the text and nothing but the text. I think it's quite a sensible approach, to be honest, because you're looking at what the film is saying to you and what's there and how you interact with it. And I think that's probably a good way of getting quite an interesting reading in terms of your own perspective and sharing an individual perspective rather than looking at what everyone else says and spending ages kind of barking at the critics.
Yeah, I do very much worry that you just get too... The film is already trying to guide you enough, which can make it hard to have an actual take on it, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've forgotten what I was about to say.
I can give you an example of that. So I've been looking into Lee Janiak recently for reasons that will become very apparent in the next big video I do. Lee Janiak produced a trilogy for Netflix called Fear Street. It's messaging aside, it's really, really good, and I really enjoyed it. And there's a character in there that the film demonizes. Actually, you know what? If I talk about this, it's going to be spoilers. I'm going to be very vague and say there's a character who's demonized because you mostly see from the perspective of the two protagonists, Sam and protagonist. I never remember names, folks. You know I never remember names. And then you're blank faced, but it's like I'd be spoiling it if I gave more details. Sam's mother. Sam's mother is demonized, meant to look awful, presented as a bit of a badman, and then you break it down and be like, what on earth does that character actually see? What's this character's knowledge of the situation? And you realize actually she's not bad at all. Everything she thinks is completely justified.
So the next video I think you're doing is
I don't mind, you can say it. It's
the next one I think you're doing is, I forgot the name of it, The Craft Legacy.
Yes, The Craft Legacy.
Sam's mother.
No, so I mentioned Lee Janiak because Lee Janiak was originally going to direct it.
Okay.
When it was originally a straight up remake.
Okay, but There isn't a character called Sam and the mother isn't demonized, which is why I'm lost.
That's okay, because I was talking about Fear Street.
Oh, sorry. Right, yes.
But this makes me worry because this'll make sense in my head.
I think I just got distracted by some of the comments right at the point you mentioned Fear Street, so I then just went down. I thought you were talking about The Craft Legacy, and was like, but there isn't a character called Sam. And the mum's presented as this kind of girl boss individual. So yeah, I just got very, very lost. Fear Street was good, but yes, I think the other thing I found with Fear Street is, and it's probably something you're going to mention, is just the thing of, the character of Sam is presented, not Sam,
Protagonist.
the protagonist, yes, whose name I can't remember, is presented as like, yes, why, like, she's a great potential girlfriend for your daughter. Why wouldn't you let your young daughter hang out with this girl who's had problems with drugs, crime, run-ins with the police, and gets into violent scrapes, and is psychologically manipulative and deeply abusive to you? What a wonderful partner. Why would you be concerned? So it's I'll be interested to see what you say on that.
It's going to be a brief mention, a very brief mention. Most of the film is me going Mauler mode on The Craft Legacy. I'm going to start off with like a proper Mauler impression for the first scene. And then I'm going to pull back because I don't think I can quite do a 5-hour job. But that first scene that shows you how messed up the Craft Legacy is going to be, that's going to get the big Welsh Mauler treatment.
Excellent.
All right. So yeah, that's what I was going to mention. But otherwise, before we get into our feature, I will tell you a little bit about what's coming up. Next week is going. I thought I'd tell you the horror homework in advance just to try it out for you. So next week is going to be Possession from 1981 with Sam Neill. I look forward to any Sam Neill movie.
Jurassic Park.
Heck yeah. Omen 3 Final Conflict.
I'd forgotten that.
Oh,
That's
yes.
Such a good film.
Oh,
it's
yes.
such a bad film.
It's a good laugh. So we're going to cover that next week. And the week after, we are going to be returning to David Lynch.
Oh, no.
We're going to be returning to David Lynch.
Hooray!
Yay! Lost Highway. So that's the first one we're doing in December. Hopefully, we're going to have TCG back. And we've got a good lad. We've got Harry from Lotus Eaters is coming on to defend the good name of David Lynch.
I was going to say, if you were hoping to have Harry in on as well, he'll have just legged it to the other side of the world to avoid that.
I'm replacing Harry in with Harry.
And he's got the right opinions on Lynch, so that's...
Precisely.
Excellent.
Precisely. We got that. Otherwise, what else do I need to say? Mr. GB, when are we returning to Plan 9? I've got that scheduled for the second film in December.
Mr. GB, just to let you know, I'm going to find where you live and I'm going to show up and I'm going to bludgeon you with a DVD case of Plan 9 because because of your actions, you resulted in me being made to watch it, and that is unforgivable, even if you do like obscure Radio 4 comedies. So just so you know, I'm going to come and get you.
Yeah, what Waifu was not enjoying that watch. that was torture.
I was genuinely checking my phone to see how long was left, about every 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Sorry, GB. I mean, it was funny, but also anyway. Okay. So other than that, When I've finished threatening your regular audience members and channel supporters.
If you don't mind, in fairness, that film. Anyway, we are on YouTube, and you know how Susan likes to run things here. We want the channel to grow, so the best thing to help that is to be doing all the liking, subscribing, and getting involved in the comments. I always like seeing what you guys put there. It's just a lot more fun for me. I can rabbit on about horror, but I like to know what you thought of things. And there are far too many smart people in the chat who often have great stuff to say. I got some very interesting leads from people in chat on this film.
Including Plan 9? No.
Well, so you know what to do. You want to get that like button and you want to just push it underwater. You just push that like button down as if it were your male version of a mistress.
Master. No.
Bit of rough.
There isn't really a male version of a mistress.
Rough trade, bit on the side.
Bit on the side.
Oh, there is a word for it in black vernacular, but I'm not going to risk it on YouTube.
Okay.
But it begins with side. Anyway, so
Oh, yes. Right.
anyway, push that like button down, and then once you've done that, if you haven't done it already, you want to lure that subscribe button into a dark bathroom and just scare it until it presses down, and you find yourself dead but subscribed to my channel. Lovely. That'll do.
And if you haven't liked or subscribed, then go and stand in the corner until a ghost gives you a like button.
There we go. Yeah, that's the main thing. Being involved in chat. Oh, we've got a suggestion here. Mr. Is.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it. We're doing that. And TCG, while we're on the subject, thank you very much for the £5.
She saluted.
I forget I don't have a camera. I did salute. This is worse than you miming to me last week. Anyway, sharing my it's not going to work. 2 girls, 1 mic. It's oh dear. I could have made that worse when I was sharing a wine glass. It's 2 girls, 1 coupe.
Right, enjoy the rest of the stream.
Oh dear. I'll move on. Anyway, thank you very much, TCG. Yes, replacing Harry with Harry is like you replacing Denzel with Connor. We're going to get Connor. We are going to get him. And I've heard Connor say he's a horror fan, and Josh has talked about Silence of the Lambs. We're getting them all on. It's going to happen.
Excellent.
Anyway, thank you again. Much appreciated. Victoria, that is the spirit. That is the spirit that we like to see on this channel. That is nice and inventive. Thank you so much. John, you didn't miss anything. We're just having a bit of a silly chat before. We're basically going to start talking about the film now.
Excellent.
So, folks, I hope you managed to do your horror homework. This is in the public domain. I found it on YouTube in HD, uncensored, which is fantastic for my thrifty little instincts. To lead in the discussion of Les Diaboliques from 1955, directed by Henri-George Clouzot, yes, Mr. GB, I'm stealing the Spice Girls away. I'm doing it. All right. To lead us in, I thought we would have a little reading from one of my favourite research tomes, Ivan Butler's Horror Cinema.
Horror in the Cinema.
Horror in the Cinema. So this is my go-to guide for anything before 1968. All right, so Waifu, take it away with the Ivan Butler.
Excellent. Chapter 9, a French classic. In early 1943, the enormous and totally unexpected success of the fantastic thriller The Cat People, director Jacques Tourneur, producer Val Lewton, set in motion the horror cycle, perhaps spiral would be a more suitable word, which has gone on expanding ever since and still shows no sign of contraction. During the same year, Henri-George Clouzot made a film dealing in horror of a subtler kind, the degeneration of a community. Its title was Le Corbeau, and the echoes of the scandal it stirred up are still not forgotten. The film was seized upon with delight by the occupying Germans. Drink for mid-century German reference.
Mid-century German gang.
The film was seized upon with delight by the occupying Germans, Romans in the chat boys, retitled A Little Town in France, and exhibited as an example of the depravity of the French provincial life. Sorry, I had to. After the liberation, the picture was indignantly banned by the military censorship and is even now regarded with disfavour in certain quarters. Clouzot was born in 1907 and died at the age of 70, and after sounding out 1 or 2 careers, was suddenly forced to earn a quick living by the financial collapse of his parents. He became secretary to a singer, thus making an acquaintance with the world of show business. He soon turned to films, first as cutter, then script adapter. He went to Berlin, worked with Anatole Litvak and others on French dialogue, and absorbed a German approach, which is evident in his own films, and eventually became an assistant director.
I'm not sure what they mean by a German approach there. I mean, because at the time I think of like German expressionism for the time, like F.W. Murnau stuff. But I'm not quite sure what Butler means by that.
He says it like he expects you to know.
This is one of the interesting things, guys. I've seen a comment here that just made me laugh. 70 Sue, I take that as a massive compliment, saying it's like being in film school. I really do take that as a compliment. We have reference material here. The thing is, there are channels all over YouTube where you can get an 8-minute version of a quick synopsis of the film and a thumbs up or thumbs down from someone very attractive and lovely to listen to, with a whole load of merch in the background. I can't do that for many reasons. They can keep you up to date with everything coming out on Netflix, Shudder, and cinemas. I can't do that. But what I think I can do is bring a little extra research, bring a deeper look, bring a closer analysis, and bring absolutely irredeemable, awful puns that make you want to claw your eyeballs out. That's what I can do. So taking time and bringing a little bit of horror education to it, going for films you probably wouldn't have watched otherwise. That's what I like to do. So I take that as a great compliment.
Even if it's not what you intended.
Oh, I bet it was. I like 70 Sue. He's been hanging around here, and 70 Sue, you've confirmed you're a dude. I'm not just misremembering that.
We'll find out.
Anyway.
What is gender anyway?
Don't you start.
So he absorbed a German approach, which is evident in his own films. Then eventually became an assistant director. Then, tragically, illness struck Georges Clouzot, and for 5 years he was in a sanatorium. On recovering, he once again turned to script writing and to the rebuilding of his interrupted career. After further frustration caused by the outbreak of the war, fair enough, he eventually directed his first film, L'assassin habite au 20 ans, I apologise to all French people, in 1942. Les Corbeaux followed in the next year. I'm going to skip over the next paragraph, which is about his next couple of films, which possibly have some content that Susan and her financial friends might have problems with, and move on to more of a discussion of the film. Les Diaboliques appeared in 1955. In Le Celler de la Peur and Le Corbeau, horror is an incidental ingredient. In Les Diaboliques, it is almost the entire recipe.
I remember you wiggled your eyebrows a bit at that bit. You had some doubts about that.
Yeah, we'll get into that, I think.
We'll get into it.
As seems inevitable with Clouzot, Les Diaboliques was received with praise and condemnation in about equal and sometimes extravagant proportions. Comments ranged from his most brilliant film, surprise ending brilliantly concealed, a master thriller, to basic absurdity of plot, vulgar, nasty, and French. The last adjective, presumably but ill-manneredly, meant as derogatory. One critic, astonishingly, finds in it something in common with Stroheim's Greed. Paul Dane could hardly find words strong enough to express his praise. Guignol at its grandest. Clouzot handles this blood-curdling material in the one way guaranteed to make it horrifically effective, i.e. by rejecting every melodramatic artifice and photographing his story head-on, at human eye level, as though he were making a newsreel. The result is, in its ghastly way, an even more shattering triumph than the same director's Le Celler de la Peur.
We should probably do some clarifying here. One of the beauties of looking at really old material, and I say this book is from about 1968, is that it gives you perspectives that you are just not going to get from modern retrospectives, because it's so grounded in the time. But one of the downsides of this is that it will just assume a lot of knowledge. So when he says Guignol at its grandest, he's referring to French theatrical tradition of effectively gory melodramatic plays. You may be familiar with a brief reference to Grand Guignol if you watched a series called Penny Dreadful, which featured a Grand Guignol theatre in its finale, and I think at another point in the first season. There's also some Grand Guignol references in the Vincent Price Theatre of Blood, but I don't think that's bringing us much more current So
No, not
not
exactly.
not super helpful.
Do you want me to read the whole summary? Because it's definitely going to take longer than pouring a Guinness. I mean, I'm happy to if people don't mind me blathering away.
I would. No, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you to do the Guinness summary.
Oh, good lord. Can we at least have like a champagne summary because it's a French film?
All right, we'll do a champagne summary. I'll give you a second to think of it because I want to just highlight Mr. GB has been very generous there. £5. Thank you very much, Mr. GB.
She has saluted the super chat.
As is tradition. When are you opening the merch store anyway, PH? You're kind enough already. Merch. Goodness me. Proper horror show merch. What would we even sell?
Martini glasses?
Martini.
Blood?
Oh gosh. PH and waifu plushies, my goodness. I am wondering, do you reckon we could get away with Blockbuster rip-off merch? Since they've gone down.
Only one way to find out.
God, I don't know. You're generous enough. I don't know. But if I do need a little extra cash injection to get me over the line for the I still want to say the secret project, even though I've announced what it is. Maybe I will end up doing something, but yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. GB. I think we're a way off plushies. And before you ask, we're not doing any Sargon style body pillows.
John Gurris just suggested bloody bath water. Get your horror girl bath water.
Oh yes. Oh dear.
Proper
Anyway,
Horror Show will become the Belle Delphine of horror film YouTubers.
Horrible Delphine.
Nice.
Yeah.
So anyway, the champagne summary.
Thanks again, Mr. GB. Go ahead, waifu.
So the film is set in a school for boys, which is apparently sort of slightly seedy, and it is presided over by a rather, an extremely cruel, egotistical and unpleasant man who has a mistress who is one of the teachers at the school, and his wife is also present at the school. The wife and the mistress have clearly teamed up and they're in cahoots about something, which many of the teachers comment on and are a bit questionable about, but they all kind of accept it, I guess. And you see these two women kind of planning together, and they're clearly trying to do something that the younger woman, the wife, is concerned about and very anxious about. So there's lots of kind of mutterings about, I don't think I can go through with it. We shouldn't do this. But in the end, they carry out their plan, which is that they, for whatever reason, schlep off in a big old van with a massive wicker basket in the back of their van down to the mistress, who is the tall, slightly butch, blonde woman's house, which is a journey or so away from Paris, where the school is. They get there in order to establish an alibi, as they keep saying, run the bath very loudly. And then the husband turns up to try and bring his wife home and or stop her leaving him, whatever, to sort of get his woman back under control.
It does just occur to me we should probably have mentioned spoilers. Spoilers for a film from 1955. We're going to spoil Les Diaboliques in full. Full spoilers. Here are the spoilers. Just so you know.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So your lad turns up to get his woman back into control. And as Joe said, it is based on a novel by the writer team of Boileau Nard. Sorry, that chap. They're two writers who work together. And we're going to gloss over the second name. So the husband turns up to bring his wife back and ends up being drugged by her. And then the mistress helps the wife to drown him in the bath. They shove him unceremoniously in the wicker basket, and then for reasons, drive all the way back to Paris, to the school, with him in the wicker basket, and then dump him in the swimming pool. I think the idea there is for them to say, we were away over the weekend, no one's seen him since the Saturday, and gosh, let's drain the pool just in case he's in there. Oh, heck, look, he drowned. Is the plan, but it doesn't seem like a very Agatha Christie would raise her eyebrows. So then what follows is kind of increasing tension, because the following day the wife decides, sort of carries on with the next part of the plan, which is, we should drain the swimming pool. And there's no body. Where's he gone? Hence sort of increasing fear, paranoia. Why is the body not there? He was dead. Did you definitely kill him? Yes, definitely killed him. And so that she sort of goes around, a policeman crops up who offers to help her find her missing husband and tries to console her. She's sort of getting more and more paranoid. One thing I forgot to mention, she has a heart problem. So she needs to avoid sudden shocks. She needs to try and sort of protect herself and be conscious of her health. And big surprises or dramatic, difficult news are, the doctor says, an absolute no, she should just stay in bed. And yes, then after the garçon has indeed been put in the basket, the film kind of takes an even more interestingly twisty turn. Do I want to reveal the big twist?
I think we will get to the twist.
Okay, so I will finish my summary by saying the wife is getting increasingly paranoid. She's had a funny turn or two. A kid at the school keeps reporting that he's seen the principal around, and no one believes him because they all believe that he's missing and or dead. And then late at night, when the wife is in bed trying to sort of keep her heart from exploding, hears creepy noises in her wing of the school. And we'll leave it there.
Let's leave it there. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting stuff in that. I mean,
and that was probably the most incoherent summary I think I've ever given.
Honestly, folks, doing the Guinness summary or the champagne summary in this case, it's not easy. It is not easy.
I've poured a whole tower of champagne.
Joe here, actually 100% correct. Why did he cheat? He's French. It's more, as much as we all laugh at it, it is very interesting that this is unashamedly French, extremely French. And the fact of him having a mistress is not scandalous.
Yes, everyone's just perfectly happy with the fact that tall blonde woman is the mistress. What they're slightly confused by is that the mistress and the wife are in such close cahoots. Mr. Gently Benevolent is correct. It is starting to feel more like a keg than a Guinness or a champagne. It's hard. It's. So I used to listen to Harrian doing his 3-minute summaries that would take about an hour.
Harrian's 3-minute summaries were the whole stream.
It is true. And I would just be sort of sat listening to it and like, that's not a summary. That's just you replaying every scene. And then first time I was on a stream horror show, I was like, okay, you do the summary then. So hands up, apologies, Harrian. It's impossible.
It's a fine art to do. It's a fine art. Now, you've just done the summary, so I think I'll just go off this and just notice something very interesting because it already got raised by Joe. Joe, you put me onto an interesting line of research for this. Before we go much deeper, you might have been wondering, why are you covering a film from 1955 made by a Frenchman? Ugh. But guys, trust me. Trust the plan. Have faith.
Plan 9. This
is an influential film. Not only has it been remade a couple of times, directly and informally, where they've basically stolen the twist. The twist of this is kind of legendary, and it's been used so many times. So it's interesting to go back to the original, but it's also really interesting because of this fact, that it was written by this writing team, Boileau-Nasserge, who have also written Vertigo. The original novel for this was Celle qui n'était pas. What was it called? What was it originally called? Butts, where is it? Okay, if you can't find it, then don't worry, we'll skip it.
You keep rabbiting and I'll have a look.
Okay, let's have a...
She Who Was No More.
Oh,
Celle qui n'était plus.
Celle qui n'était plus. I was close. I think I was close. Anyway.
I would like to apologise to France for the accents.
So, yeah, we've got a bit of a Hitchcock connection, but we've got a couple of Hitchcock connections. We've got major ones. So, one, Alfred Hitchcock wanted to adapt this. He tried to get the rights to it, but it had already been brought up by Clouzot. So Hitchcock waits a while, and he's very much inspired by this film when he makes Psycho. It's you often can see Psycho referred to as almost his riposte, his friendly riposte to Les Diaboliques.
So Psycho was like a 2016 response video. Are you saying Hitchcock is a reply guy?
No, he loved Les Diaboliques, but he wanted to do his own version of it. So think of this thing of your character has tried to get away with a murder, get away with a crime, but they have to deal with a really interesting investigator who's sort of informal. So the detective in this is actually retired. So he's not really a policeman, but he is very sharp, very invasive with his questions. Just how Arbogast, played by Martin Balsam, is in Psycho. This has a murder in the bathtub. Psycho has a murder in the shower. You can see them just play off each other quite nicely. And there is a really, really direct thing that Hitchcock most definitely took from Les Diaboliques. And it is, when I can get this, oh gosh, this is going to be difficult, guys. This is at the end of Les Diaboliques. And I've given you the translation here. Ne soyez pas diabolique. No, I can't read that now because it's covered by the translation. But this warning to people, don't tell anyone about the twist. Don't tell them about what happens. Keep the secret. Now, this is really interesting. This is getting a kind of formal culture into film, that you watch the whole film and you don't just tell people what happens. It's basically saying take film a bit seriously. We got to remember back in this time, people would basically walk into the cinema in the middle of a show and just sit there and wait for it to restart. So they watch the whole thing. Now they might walk in, walk out. It's really casual, right? This is the turning point for where you take the film a bit more seriously and you really make an effort so that everyone watches the whole thing and really appreciates the story. And I really like that. Now, what the heck does that have to do with Hitchcock? I'm going to have to really minimize this or we won't be able to see it. Okay, so this warning plays at the end of Les Diaboliques. Hitchcock advertised Psycho with this. This was the posters. These were in the cinema. There are even full-size cutouts of Alfred Hitchcock holding a sign warning people they would not be admitted into the theatre after the start of Psycho. They have to see it from the start or they're not allowed in. So I think he's very, very clearly inspired by Les Diaboliques for this.
In which case, to avoid causing the ghosts of Clouzot and Hitchcock to turn in their graves, we should avoid the giving away the twists.
Yeah, we're going to hold off for a little while. Absolutely, Mr. GB. This is not like the the midnight launch of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, where people went by with loudspeakers doing drive-by spoilings on nerds.
Yeah, someone did that when I went to get the 7th Harry Potter dressed up in a depressingly short miniskirt with my hair dyed red to be Ginny Weasley, waiting in the queue outside W.H. Smith's at just gone midnight. And 2 16-year-olds who clearly didn't give a toss went past, got the book, cracked it open to the last page and read the last sentence. And genuinely, I think there were some 11-year-olds who were about to go do some serious time.
Oh, no.
Slim, when you said they stole that from the Nutcracker, you're talking about the Don't Give the Secret Away. Are you thinking of the Mousetrap, which is the Agatha Christie theatrical show? Because that one is... They also do that. I've seen it, and they you go in, and first of all, the program has a big thing saying keep the secret. At the end of the show, as you've all finished giving the applause, the actors sort of stop and say, "Don't give the ending away, keep the secret." And from memory, I'm pretty sure some busy front of house staff in the theatre go around while you're watching the second half of the play and change all the posters inside the theatre so that they all say keep the secret as you leave.
Oh.
Because they really don't want you to don't want you to give away the ending. It's a fairly obvious ending, to be fair. It's not one of Christie's best, but that's a story for another time.
In fairness, you are a bit of a whiz on this stuff, and you did spot the twist coming from a mile away.
To be fair, I think I spotted it virtually from when they'd got to the house, I think. When they got to her apartment with her wonderfully French tenants above. Who was it said that you were expecting the tenant on the floor above to start miming that he was in some kind of glass box? That was...
Oh.
He was so French.
Oh, hang on, this chap. I've got him. This guy is a laugh. I mean, this is something I really love from films of the time, is you have these really out there, bizarre characters who are just acting at about 140%. We had this with, we recently watched Gaslight from 1944 or 1945.
One of those.
Yeah, one of those, yeah. And there's
a bit modern for me.
This wonderful old lady who's just the comic relief, but she's so over the top. She's absolutely wonderful. She's the whole movie for me. But you really get that sort of lovely, I guess, contrast with these really flavoursome characters that kind of lighten the tone a bit. And speaking of the tone, I found this impressively dark and impressively complex. A lot of the meat of this is the relationship between the two women and their contrast.
Hello, Gatsby. Speaking of relationships.
Hello, Gatsby. What did you think of this? Thank you, friend. Can we have a pats for Gats in the chat? We knew he'd come in and have his opinions, bless him. All right. Yes. Big Gatsby moment. Okay. I found it impressively dark at the start, like this tone. The wife, whose name I should actually confirm.
It's Christine.
Christine, thank you. Christine is very vulnerable. Nicole is a lot more butch. In the original novel, there is a bit of gender swappery, by the way. It wasn't the wife and the mistress versus the chap. And there was actually explicit lesbianism in the book, so I gather.
Gatsby disapproves of lesbianism.
I got some bad news for you, Gats. You best start believing. Anyway, so they removed the lesbianism element and they did a gender swap on one of the characters so that we have the arrangement as it is. Now, some of the theories of this are basically that this is so the director could go full Len Wiseman. He could go full Mike Flanagan, full Kevin Smith in Chasing Amy and cast his wife.
Fair play.
Hey, it worked out. She's good.
Yeah. She's very good.
And we never complain about Kate Siegel and Mike Flanagan stuff.
No, literally never.
We like Kate Siegel. It definitely worked out here. Although the production reports do reference some tension as he seemed to really give his wife the spotlight, possibly to the detriment of the other actress playing Nicole.
Who someone earlier in the chat said reminds them of Kim Novak from Vertigo, and that's exactly who I was thinking of.
Oh, yeah.
Kim Novak. Also, the hair reminds me a little bit of Marion Crane. So it's I think some of that might just be just the style of the time, but yes, it is a shame that she doesn't get more of a chance to shine. But going back to that kind of really sinister tone at the start, I think it opens, it really sets the kind of the threat level, really, because it opens with Blondie wearing sunglasses she's called Nicole, that's her name, to hide the fact that I don't even get the reference. Yeah, she's hiding the fact that she's got an absolute stonker of a black eye from her mistress. And it's, you know, I mean, for a start, there's an element of like, you're not even married to him. Why are you still. Anyway, so she's got a black eye. The wife is comforting her. So the teachers are kind of commenting on how weird it is that, the wife is comforting the mistress. So it sets up this kind of strange, queasy dynamic of the relationship. And then you just see the husband, Michel, being just increasingly foul and nasty and creepy and just utterly unpleasant. This scene was just, it's the kind of scene where I think it was in some ways limited in what it could show because of the time, but in many ways it's stronger for that, because as you see, the wife, everyone else has left the dining hall. The husband is about to lose his rag at his wife, and she kind of backs away from him off screen behind a wall. And then you just hear, and he sort of follows her off screen, and you just hear her kind of crying out like,
No.
yeah.
Actually, can I just hold you off on that a bit?
Okay,
because
sorry.
there's a bit before that, and you basically said exactly what I wanted to get onto, which is remembering it's 1955. Now, we showed you already 1960s Les Yeux sans visage, Eyes Without a Face, where they showed quite a lot of gore, actually a surprising amount of gore. But you're still very, very aware of the restraints on what can be shown. So they have to be creative, just like you said, Waifu. Now, before that, there's a scene which establishes how dominant he is. They're talking about the financial strain on the school and how he's refusing to spend money to get better food for the boys. Basically, they don't deserve it. They're rowdy. They'll eat what they're given, based. But he forces her to eat the food that she's not feeling like eating. She finds it disgusting. He forces her to eat it. He humiliates her.
Speaking of indigestion, Joe.
Yeah, even though she's sort of like close to vomiting. There's also, if you want to read this into it, a sort of sexual coercion element. Now, possibly this is me reading too much, but the whole he's literally commanding her to swallow.
Oh my, I hadn't even thought of that.
I'm just,
Well,
because of the censorship, you have to be creative. You have to look into the subtext. And there's some really interesting subtext in this movie. Like, the lesbianism is kind of there subtextually. They play with it, but they don't really do much with it. It's kind of there as an element of tension.
There's a definite butch femme dynamic, for example.
Definitely. And it does, psychologically, it gets creative because it's almost like she goes from one domineering masculine influence to another. And she's always sort of, you can miss it and it becomes more relevant once we get the twist. But it's about her not being free. She's always under control.
Yes.
But anyway, so we've had the bit where she's been forced to eat something disgusting and she's nearly thrown up in front of everyone. And then we get this bit, which is on screen right now.
Yes. And so everyone else has left the room. They've all been kind of like sort of yelled out of the room by the husband. So it's just the two of them left. And he backs her sort of into a corner off screen. And as Chloe said, you hear her sort of crying, no. And the film leaves you to imagine what he might be doing. Is he beating her? Is there something else even more unpleasant going on? But it, in some ways, because of the limitation of what the filmmakers can show, it's a thing I've said before about horror sort of monster films as well. The kinds of things that the imagination can come up with are far, far worse than anything that could ever really be shown on screen.
It's very funny you say that, because there is a bit in this that I really like. Okay, here we go.
Do you want me to read it?
Let's see. It's kind of tell you what, I will just it's directly referencing the spoiler, so I'll just read the line that Ivan Butler puts in here. It's one of the truly horrific moments in cinema, paling the most elaborate papier-mâché monster into significance. He's really talking about the joy of the psychological torment. The restrained version of horror is more effective.
And I think this film does that really well. This is, I suppose, probably a good time to talk. Is it a good time to talk about the whether or not horror is in every scene?
We might as well,
Yeah.
because I have some fairly large disagreement with that statement, and in fact, maybe we'll contrast that statement with this image. How about that?
Shall I try and put the case for the fact that it is very full of horror?
You rock on.
Even though I'm not sure I entirely agree. So it does have it's got the kind of the thriller element, that really kind of tense psychological atmosphere, particularly with the abusive husband, and then at the same time the kind of domineering blonde lesbian, who's not a lesbian. And so it kind of builds up, and it's got things like that increasing tension of the car ride, and then the sort of slightly supernatural element of we've seen them drown the body. And what they do really, really well, and I would say is truly quite jarring, is they sort of pull back and show you the body after he's been drowned. He kind of floats back to the surface of the water, and he's so he just looks sort of slightly misshapen. It's really cleverly done, really nastily done. It's a truly quite shocking moment when you see the dead body for the first time. And you have a couple of moments when you see him in the trunk as well. And again, that's really nastily done.
His eyes are basically rolled back in his head, so you only see the whites of the eyes.
Yeah, and they're slightly
very
bulging.
Awful.
And I'd say that is a sort of horrific moment. And then playing on that, there's the, they think they've got rid of the body, but then when they go to look for the body again, they can't find it. So where is he? Is there supernatural? Is he sort of stalking and haunting them? And so that kind of tension builds up. And I think there is something horrific in that, or there could be, of that feeling of, are they being haunted by a ghost? Are they sort of supernatural forces gathering to bring them to account for their crime? And then there is I sort of want to mention the final twist, to be honest.
Shall we? I maybe let's just say it now. We're nearly an hour into the stream. Let's just do the final twist so that we can do our analysis a bit more freely.
Yeah. So
so final twist. Go ahead, waifu.
The final twist is that all the way through, you think that the wife and the mistress are working together to kill the husband and be finally free of him. And then at the end of the film, it is revealed that the husband is not dead and has not ever been dead. And he has come back to life, or not come back to life. He reveals himself in a bathtub in a very almost identical shot to the one in which we first see the body. And he stands up out of the bath, pulls out prosthetics from his eyes so that he can see normally again, and reveals that he is still alive, which causes his wife, with her weak heart, to basically have a heart attack or an episode, and she dies from shock. And you realise that the mistress and the husband were in it together all along, trying to kill the wife because she holds the financial clout in the relationship.
Yeah, to be specific, he rises up in the bathtub to make it look like he's actually a ghost, so that the wife, they've been working to try and make the wife really think a haunting has been going on.
Because she's a devout Catholic, that's the other thing.
Yes, and so she basically dies of fright. Her weak heart is overpowered. She dies, and it's at that point that the husband takes the prosthetics out of his eyes, revealing it all to be a ruse.
This prosthetic bit was just truly, that was nicely and unpleasantly done.
It was also filmed in an alarming close-up, which was quite weird to watch. In its own way, quite odd. Anyway, now that we've dropped that, we can,
Yeah. So, and I would say that those sorts of moments, the kind of creeping tension around, is she being haunted? What's going on? Have people seen the ghost of her husband? All of that's really nice. There's a really, really tense scene at the end where she... Yes, Gatsby. Yeah.
Hello, lad.
She's kind of walking through this dark house, and there's someone behind. So you see sort of a gloved hand closing a door and someone else opening it. It's all very tense, very kind of... There's no music as well. That's the other thing, which weirdly makes it tenser.
Yeah.
So that I would say is something that future horror films have learned from. But as to whether or not horror is in every moment, what do you think, Horrorshow?
I think it's a difficult claim because you always get into the weeds when you're arguing, is it a horror, is it a thriller? I think I generally go with what is the overall intention of the film? Is it to horrify or is it to make it tense? Does it kind of go over the line of realism to deliver the scare and gore? Things like that. Is it paying more attention to the gore than you might expect? That's where I tend to start deciding whether something is horror or not. But ultimately, these are they're going to be quite subjective. As for is horror in every frame, I think it is actually a fairly consistent bit of tension. The tension never really drops off once they've done the murder, because you are really following Christine as a protagonist, and she is the one whose nerves are being frayed, so it's in the interest of the film to make sure her tension never ever drops.
Yes.
So I don't know, I've actually ended up coming around to it, but it's not like it's constantly aiming to horrify or put you in a state of fear, but it is aiming to keep tension up.
It's the turning of the screw.
Yeah, and this is actually that itself is a really good reference. I mean, I would be very surprised if forgive me,
Never.
The Innocents, 1961. I can't remember the director. I'm very sorry. That is very much in a similar vein of very minimalist horror. The Innocents was based on the turn of the screw.
I know it was, but I'm trying to remember if I've actually seen it, and I'm pretty sure I have, and I can't remember it.
Okay, no, absolutely wonderful. I mean, you liked The Haunting. I'd say it's more difficult than The Haunting. It's a lot more restrained than The Haunting, but
I'm pretty sure we've seen it, and for some reason it's not stuck in my mind.
Yeah. So it doesn't feel like a modern horror. It feels like on its way to being a genre that is unashamedly really trying to horrify you quite consistently. It will stay in the mode of a thriller that goes into really, really dark places.
Yeah.
Very much like Psycho, right?
Yes. I would say, yeah, if you're comparing this to Psycho, and you're saying, is Psycho a thriller or a horror film? You can make the case either way. And I think the one thing that, you can definitely say about Psycho is it is just unremittingly tense. And I would say that's a nice reference, John Gorris. I would say that it is... This one doesn't quite manage the tension in the same way that Hitchcock does, possibly because Clouzot isn't trying to do that in the same way. There are some bits that break the tension, such as the funny drunk guy on the journey home and that kind of thing. But then that kind of builds back into a tension again, where it's, there's that constant fear of discovery. That's the other thing I would say that's a similarity to Psycho is the tension of the driving. There's not as much. I feel like a lot of the first part of Psycho is just her driving and her internal monologue. Whereas this one, it's two people driving a car, but it is that kind of, it's sort of slightly elongated scenes that show that kind of tense relationship and the uncertainty between them. And particularly once they've got a body in the boot, it's nicely, you as an audience are worried about them being discovered. So it does kind of increase the tension there.
Yeah, Simone. I can't say this.
Signore?
Yeah, Simone Signoret as Nicole does have to be very restrained in this. I'd say it's borderline thankless because she has to be very restrained so that Christine's actions and more feminine character can contrast.
Yes.
But in a way, she's also stealing a lot of scenes by doing little. It's very good. But yeah, you do have moments like the one we've got on screen there, where it is more levity.
Yes.
Like the neighbours who've been over the top. They've been kind of comedy characters. They're kind of there for witness. Yeah.
You want one of them to whip out a string of garlic.
Yeah, they're wonderfully OTT, and obviously they're hauling out the wicker basket. And I was massively reminded of American Psycho at this. My caption for this image is, "It's a Gautier basket." I've watched American Psycho maybe too many times. You're
Was
giving
that
me a
another
blank.
one of your insomnia tapes?
No, not at all. Not at all. There's a bit where Patrick Bateman is dragging a body out in a luggage bag, and I think it's Lewis Carruthers sees him and then starts mincing up to him and says, basically asks what make the bag is. But when we're talking about this, about the horror, about the nature of it, there's a bit in The Butler that I would really like you to read about how the murder is shown.
Okay, tell me where to read from.
So let's go from luring him away. So this is from the Ivan Butler again.
Luring him away from the school to Nicole's cheap lodging house, they induce Michelle to drink some doctored whiskey and drown him in a bath. The body is later wrapped. Hang on, I'll wait for you to finish typing.
Sorry. And go.
So they induce Michelle, the husband, to drink some doctored whiskey and drown him in a bath. The body is later wrapped in a nylon tablecloth, packed into a laundry basket, taken back to the school, and at dark tipped into the grimy water of the school swimming pool. The entire murder sequence is a clumsy, stumbling, panting scene of horror. The lugging of the heavy, uncannily resistant body to the bath, the bubbling immersion, the dark-soaked lounge suit, the horrible buoyancy, the desperate inspiration, Nicole's, of placing a heavy ornament on its chest to keep it submerged. A shot which is intended for a purpose to print itself on the mind's eye, and succeeds, of the staring, upturned eyes in the flabby dead face under the water. It is all ghastly, and all done without any hint of the sadistic revelling in violent death which makes many routine films so repellent. In some degree, it resembles the killing in Hitchcock's Torn Curtain, in which he has stated his intention of showing just how difficult it is to deprive a man of his life. It is, when one considers it, a more salutary, a fundamentally less indecent method of presentation than the balletic deaths in a western, or the technicolor glamorized slayings in historical or romantic epics, where murder appears as simple or aesthetically satisfying. Killing is a difficult and filthy business, Clouzot and Hitchcock say, and should appear as such. Yes, Gatsby.
Gatsby coming in with a punctuation at the end of the paragraph. I thought that was a really good take from Butler.
Yes, and it's nicely done. And it is, I mean, to be fair, it's probably, when we're talking about whether or not it's a horror film, there's an element of, was this horrific for audiences at the time? Because it probably was. Whereas I think modern audiences, we are used to a lot more gore, a lot more gratuitous spilling of claret, and just it's a lot more sort of over the top, and in some ways weirdly less realistic, despite the fact that special effects are improved. And so I think there's probably a nice comparison that, you know, this would have potentially been very horrific for the time, and arguably is also a more nuanced and intelligent portrayal of murder, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I absolutely love from films in this period, is that it is very intensely aware of the moral aspect. So you have Christine is a Catholic. She talks about that. Now, Nicole is not, but the fact that they have that dialogue about the religious implications of the murder adds so much more depth than when the film just assumes as a baseline that it's just a material process. And then they are really taking it seriously. Now, they do have to damp it down a little bit, unfortunately. So I was rewatching the drowning scene, and there was something I felt a little bit deprived of, was that they either show you the shot of Nicole from the elbows up pushing down, or they show you her arms pushing Michelle into the water like that. But you can't get a long shot where you see her pushing him down. So they do have to split it, and I thought possibly that is for censorship reasons. That was
potentially.
I felt that dampened it a little bit, but at the same time, you're still very aware of the cost of the action. You're still very aware that this is a serious thing to be taken seriously, and I like that point, that horror may be looked down on, but certainly for this era, where it's not trying to get a laugh out of killing a fat Jack Black with dreadlocks as a terrible Rasta.
Oh, God.
In I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, that
I still wish you hadn't made that film. Jack
Black may have taken his name off the credits for that film, but we watched it and it was him. And anyway.
We still know what he did last summer.
They take it seriously. There's this little bit, I was talking about the subtext earlier. There is this shot that we get. Oh gosh, where are you? Give me a second. It might take me a moment to
While
find
you're
it.
looking for it, a thing about taking it seriously I found interesting, and this is so I have Catholic family, but I'm not myself Catholic, so I may entirely misrepresent this. But one thing I found interesting, and if there are Catholics in the chat, I'd love to know more, is before she leaves to go with Nicole down to Nicole's flat, and where Christine knows that they're intending to kill her husband, she has a little altar in her room, and you see her not only put out the candles on either side of the sort of altar picture, but there's also a light above it that she puts out. And I know in Catholic churches there is always a light above the altar that never goes out, because it's sort of, I believe, essentially the light of God. And you genuflect to it, and you genuflect to the altar when you're walking down the aisle. And so I wonder, but I don't know, whether her shutting that light out and turning it off or blowing the candle out is in some way significant, that she's kind of, it's a sort of slight acceptance of, I am going to commit something deeply sinful. I'm possibly reading far too much into it, and that it's perfectly normal that, to avoid a fire hazard, she would blow that out. But just knowing that, for example, my grandparents have a sort of similar little lamp in an equivalent place in their house that never goes out.
I wish I could comment. I wasn't raised in the Catholic tradition, so I don't know. I did want to point out that this shot here that they use, this is classic cinematic language. So the focus is on your man, Michelle, there, but we also get Christine in the shot, in the mirror. Now, the use of showing someone in the mirror is usually cinematic language for them appraising their own actions. It's a sign of their conscience. So we've got to be aware that she is seeing herself as well.
Yeah.
And she's just basically, this is her confronting him, and she is still half and half. Is she going to go through with it? And given the twist at the end, he knows how to provoke her. So he basically looks like he's going to nope out of it. And he forces her to bring him back in. It's quite masterful manipulation, but this moment where she has to sort of see herself, and that really holds her back from going through with it, is noticeable. She does not see herself in the mirror in the rest of this scene. This is a lovely bit of subtext.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, there's a very similar thing used in The Shining, I'll point out. I've got to say, this isn't my point. As ever, when I talk about The Shining, I'm ripping off Rob Agar. He is the guy with a clever brain who notices this stuff. But anytime that someone sees a ghost in The Shining, there is a mirror present,
Ooh.
indicating it can basically always be in their head.
That is nice. I do love it when films make, or when people dealing with horror, when ghosts are essentially more psychological than they are real. I like that reading of ghosts.
I also noticed here that it was the old Johnny Walker Red that they doused with tranquilizer to kill him.
Shocking.
Yeah, it's quite odd though, isn't it? Just seeing the old Johnny Walker brand in 1955, unchanged. Anyway, so yeah, we've got a very solid, recognizable murder that does have a big impact on her. After they've done the murder, she never really relaxes. It's constantly on her mind. She's feeling the pressure of it, and I absolutely loved that.
After attacks, never relax.
Careful now. And it's this wonderful tension. So this is it's something I associate with Hitchcock, but Hitchcock loves dramatic irony, and they're making so much of us knowing what she is expecting to see. So if that's not making a bit of sense, oh, hang on, we got something here that's really interesting. I haven't thought of this. What do you reckon to that? They use a bronze statue of a lion to weight him down, to make sure he drowns in the tub. What do you think of that?
I like it.
I could go for
and
that.
There's also, as someone else pointed out, there's an arrow. When you look at the statue, there's an arrow in the lion's butt.
He's been brought down. Oh, well done. This is what I mean. There are smart people in the chat. I didn't notice that. I did not notice that. That is fantastic.
And as John Goris has added to it, it's the lionesses turning on the male. It's that kind of lion. They're two women, two sort of lionesses, essentially completely in his thrall, and they're turning on him. That's a nice metaphor. I like that. I don't quite know what to do with it, but I like it.
No, it kind of works. It works. All right. And there's some more parallels about Psycho being drawn out then. Yes, with the appearance of the policeman at the end to capture them, it is very sort of last minute moralizing that maybe feels a bit clunky now, to be honest. But it's better than the psychiatrist at the end of Psycho, guys.
Oh God, that psychiatrist. As far as I was concerned, the film should end with either your man coming through, Anthony Perkins dressed in the wig and the dressing gown and going hog wild with the knife, and then just skip the middle bit and cut to him alone in the prison cell. That would make sense. But yes, it's interesting that I watched it on Monday and I feel like I've already forgotten some of it, but the ending of this, the sort of plot ending essentially is she's died. She's had a heart attack and died because she's seen what she thinks is the ghost of her husband rising out of the bath, in a kind of ghastly echo of the murder scene. And then the husband steps out of the bath, takes out his prosthetic eyeballs, and opens the door and says, "You can come in now." And the mistress comes in. Sorry, I was talking away from the microphone. The mistress comes back in, and they sort of say a couple of things which tell you that they've been plotting together, and they also have a big 1960s embrace, so you get that they've been plotting together all along. The whole plot wasn't to kill him, it was to create the conditions where she would die. As someone in the chat said earlier, I don't know why they couldn't just sneak up on her and yell boo.
That was Mr. Gently Benevolent. I mean, we did discuss that ourselves. Is it maybe a bit far to go if you just need to give her a good scare?
It's like certain Agatha Christie plots, like Mysterious Affair at Styles. I'm going to try and avoid going on a massive detour here, but basically the two murderers inveigle their way into this woman's house for like literally one of them years on end, and then kill her in quite an elaborate way in order that one of them will immediately be suspected, arrested, and potentially tried for the murder, so that then they can establish that he actually had an alibi and it totally couldn't possibly have been him, so that then under the law of double indemnity he won't be able to be tried again and he'll get off scot-free. But then afterwards you're sort of thinking about it, you're like, they really didn't need to do any of that. Why is that the approach they took rather than just attempting to kill and not get caught? And this is similar. It's kind of, this is a very overly elaborate plot for the sake of having a really tense, sort of intense film. But after they've revealed that they're plotting together, the door opens and this retired policeman who's been cropping up a bit and asking awkward questions and alarming the wife suddenly walks in and is like, aha, now you're under arrest. And then doesn't really explain much about like how he knew or suspected that it was worth him lurking. Or does he? Did I miss that?
It does get a bit fuzzy. I don't think the detective is as interesting or as well written as Arbogast, I've got to say, in Psycho. But there are 2 points I want to round off quickly. So I started talking about dramatic irony because of Hitchcock, basically. The film Rope is nothing but dramatic irony, and it's glorious. I am going to try and cover Rope in one of my real horror versus real horror things.
Nice.
Because Rope is based on 2 real murderers, even though it's very different. But there's dramatic irony in this where they want... the Henri-George is not wrong at all.
That is very accurate.
Oh gosh. So they tip the guy's drowned body in the swimming pool, and then they're basically waiting for it to be discovered and hoping it will be discovered, and then it's not. So we've just shots of the pool and people hanging around the pool, because of dramatic irony, are filled with tension for us, and it's wonderful. So it's very Hitchcockian. And it feels cheeky for me to say that before, but Hitchcock was making films before this.
Oh, yeah.
Hitchcock was making films before Clouzot, as far as I'm aware. I mean, we saw The Lodger from 1927, and that's not even his first. Anyway.
Yeah, Clouzot's first film was L'Assassin habite de 20 ans in 1942.
BTFO'd, noob. Anyway, so that was a dramatic irony I wanted to refer to. The other bit, since you brought up the Catholicism, I did get one screen cap that I thought was really interesting. Because you were asking about the detective, well, she's in a very weakened state and he's still hanging around trying to find out. And she basically does a bedside confession to him. I very much read this as like a confession to a priest. You guys... if you want to type Reach, I will forgive you.
She has warmed up, guys. Don't worry. She is using full safety protocols before she engages on this dangerous activity.
I know she can completely see him. There is no barrier between them. But if you look, there are barriers in this shot. She has this kind of lattice behind her in the manner that you might see a lattice in a confession booth. There is a partition to the right behind the guy. It is somewhat suggestive, but regardless, even if it is not meant to be a confession booth, she is confessing.
I mean, the other point is that sort of confession booths, yes, exist in Catholic churches. Again, second generation or non-Catholic here with Catholic family, so I might get this entirely wrong, but it is a sacrament. It doesn't have to take place in a confession booth. That's just in churches to make it kind of more, I suppose, easy for people to do, because there's it's easy to confess if you can't see the person you're speaking to. But last rites. So last rites, the priest comes along, here's your final confession, shrives you of your sins, and, says a prayer over your body before you die. And if that doesn't happen before you die, then you're wanking, basically. You won't necessarily go to heaven. That's not the technical term in the liturgy. But yeah, essentially that is a sort of, I think that is supposed to echo the last rites. The priest coming to her bedside, and she is, she thinks she's on the point of death at this point because she she's had doctors around her all day being like, you're like on the point of death. So she, on some level, as a Catholic, would be expecting a priest or asking for a priest, and so she is thinking of confession and thinking of her eternal soul.
It is kind of coding. She never goes through the divorce. She does do something that she thinks is mortally wrong, and it's quite noticeable. She doesn't forgive herself. And I think that's a really interesting morality that sticks through this film. And I always notice this when we watch something from the 1950s. I always notice it. And it just makes, sort of pre-70s, pre-60s even.
The kind of prevalence of Christianity.
No, I would just say moral consideration. I just see it as moral consideration that is interesting and makes it much more mature.
Yeah.
So it does help, and it feels like a moral necessity that Nicole and Michelle are caught at the end.
Yes.
And in a way she retains morality because she confesses, because she feels guilty.
You could say there's an interesting point as well, though, in that a nice extra little twist at the end of the film is that, and again, plot spoilers, earlier in the film, when she's starting to be haunted by her guilt and sort of start to think, that her husband has come back from the dead to torment her, there's a little kid with a catapult who, yeah, you've got it right there, reminds me of one of our scouts. He says, the principal punished me. And they're like, who? He's, the principal's missing. He's dead. We don't know where he is. And the kid is absolutely insistent that, the principal punished me. He, took my catapult off me and told me to stand out here. At the end of the film, after we have seen Christina dead and the policeman has confirmed that Christina's definitely dead because these two have now just committed murder. Then, yeah, at the end, the same kid suddenly has a slingshot back, and one of the teachers goes, well, who gave you that? Oh, Madame de l'Étal, the principaless, gave it me back. And you're suddenly like, oh, heck, is she a ghost? And there's possibly an interesting thing there of, an unquiet soul. In her mind, she committed murder. And so she can't rest, even though she didn't actually.
Yeah. She doesn't let herself off the hook. She goes on this very interesting journey. Like, she goes into quite dark places for this. So
we can imagine.
This is all part of the plot. She's got to believe there's a haunting. So she's told about the kid with the slingshot, and she's they get one of her husband's suits redelivered as if it had been recently taken for dry cleaning, implying he's still alive. This is all stuff to make her think the haunting is going on.
You said
Doubt
she
what
never
she
again
said.
sees herself in the mirror.
Oh, sorry. In that scene.
Oh, right. Sorry. Okay.
She sees herself in the mirror when she's going looking. So she finds an apartment that he'd rented in secret, potentially somewhere that he was stupping Nicole. I don't know. She's also shown a report about a random body in the Seine. So they go and check that out. It's also something I have to note here. What does it say about the crime rate that just a random drowning in Paris makes you go, oh yeah, oh that's worth checking out. That's got to be him.
I'd better go and ask Nick Griffin in the morgue what he thinks.
I was going to say Nick Griffin as a morgue attendant was a particular interesting highlight that I didn't expect. But
except his eyes are pointing in the same direction. So.
Oh, savage! I think he lost one.
Yeah, I shouldn't actually check.
Yeah, you wouldn't say that about Gordon Brown, would you?
Probably would.
Bringing the tone down, waifu. Shame on you. Shall we get to the absolute nightmare of the ending.
Mm.
Oh, also there was this cute shot of where he sneaks into the photo.
That was creepy.
It just really nicely done details, and the ghostly face at the window, this might be a reach, I don't know, but it's a very prominent motif in The Innocents, made 4 years after this. I'm just saying, maybe some inspiration was drawn. Oh, looks like we're not the only person. We're not the only people to notice the resemblance there. Anyway.
He started his film career very early.
Oh, dear. All right, let's get into that wonderful ending. She's confessed. The detective, by the way, is sticking around after basically hunting down clues. So he's still on the premises. He finds a wicker basket where which basically confirms her story. And he's like, oh, hang on, I've got to stay around. Anyway, it's this very night that she starts hearing noises. And oh my gosh, this reeks of The Innocents. It reeks of The Haunting, except those films came after this. And is it groundbreaking that a woman in a white dress looking all vulnerable,
an extremely transparent white dress, I couldn't help noticing.
Yes, it was quite
it was very French.
It was quite, yes, there's quite anatomical details at points. Anyway, I'm not saying this is super unique, and this was the first film to have a woman in a white dress looking vulnerable and innocent, stalking through dark hallways. But my goodness, is it well done? It is so well done.
It's things like she hears a noise in one room and goes heads towards that room. And as she goes into it, you see a gloved hand closing a door behind her. So clearly someone sneaking behind her going into another room. And it's just like, at this point, you don't know who it is. I'd figured out by this point, although I was expecting the twist to be the mistress and the husband are in on it, and they're doing all this to set her up. But that didn't stop it being incredibly tense. Sort of like with Gerald's game last week, where knowing that the Moonlight Man was real weirdly made him much more of a threat. Well, not weirdly, it's much more of a threat if it's not your imagination and it's actually a man in your room when you're asleep and tied to a bed. So similar to this to an extent, the knowing that there's definitely someone in that corridor, that it's not all in her mind, and you can't see who the threat is, so she's just being kind of stalked and chased and pursued. God, it was tense.
Yeah, just absolutely amazing. And I'm not doing the full payoff shot. You know my policy, I don't do the payoff shot.
We don't do the money shots here.
No money shots. This is a family-friendly stream. Also because the film is often meant to build up to that super climactic, super iconic moment. So I am not going to fully show that, but I will give you a hint of it.
We know the wife swallows. I'm very sorry. I'll take myself out.
I try and keep the tone high on this. The absolute state of you, waifu.
You should not have married me.
Absolute state of waifu. Shocking state of affairs. Anyway. If that is if that is for waifu disgracing herself, Sue, you're not wrong. Anyway, she comes back in. He's looking super grim in the bathtub. He rises up like a corpse. His hands just sort of dangle in front of him in a zombie-like fashion. It is nasty. It is so good. And you cut back and forth between him rising up and her falling down, and it's quite unrelenting, the pacing of the edit. You can see her just being overwhelmed and sliding down. It is incredibly effective horror. It is a fantastic payoff.
And as someone pointed out, that there's the way they film the heart attack, they do it in sort of segments and sections, and so yeah, it's incredibly effective because she is her body's breaking at that point, and it's it's sort of
Mm.
it's far like that scene is quite fast paced, but at the same time, what's happening to her feels unbearably slow in a way.
Mm. John's got a point here. So visual cue from EC Comics. I mean, I'm minded of like older stories. I'm thinking of like Poe, of Algernon Blackwood, of Lovecraft especially. It's often just the sight of the spectre is enough to break the mind and break the body.
It's a trope in Sherlock Holmes stories as well that a similar thing of someone pretending to be a ghost to sort of, it's a sort of Hamlet trick. Again, someone mentioned Hamlet earlier. It's the fake ghost or the sort of fake representation of the crime in order to get someone to cry out. It's a very there's sort of folk horror stories of things like, you know, a knife will spurt, you know, a knife that was used to commit murder the blood will sort of freshen and run again on the blade of the knife when the murderer picks it up. So I think genuinely, to an extent, sort of very early police forces used to, as a way of trying to detect, figure out who was a murderer. They were like, well, this is a murder weapon. We reckon you did it, Sonny Jim. You take hold of it. And if the blood actually sort of freshens again, then clearly you done it. Doesn't often work.
I'm reminded of the taking photos of the eyeballs.
Yes, just to see if they'd captured the final image of the killer. It's that kind of thing. But there's a real element in a lot of kind of folk horror, I suppose, or proto-horror, where that idea of kind of eternal guilt of you know, from beyond the grave, the victim coming back to cry out at the murderer. Macbeth has a lot of that. Raising the tone again after I dropped it
Now
through
you
the
want to
floor.
sound classy, don't you, waifu? Now you want to come off all classy like you. No. All right. So, I mean, that brings us to it. It is an incredibly tense sequence. This is why I love showing people this stuff. I genuinely think you could show Zoomers who've been watching just Blumhouse stuff with all the jump scares. I think you could show them this ending sequence with a little bit of build up. I think it would work for them.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime I've done this, when I've taken someone, you know, far young people in their people just in their 20s, and I've shown them stuff from the 60s and earlier, we've had really good results, and it's been so uplifting for me, actually.
It is wholesome. I remembered, another element of someone.
Oh,
Joe
go
mentioned
ahead.
Inspector Morse, which made me think of Agatha Christie, obviously. And she uses a similar trick. It's that kind of showing someone a representation of their guilt to get them to confess, to elicit a confession. So in A Murder is Announced, Miss Marple hides herself in a cupboard, and they sort of basically create a scene where the woman she knows to be the murderess is kind of provoked into coming out and trying to do someone away in the kitchen while the police are in the other room. And just as she's in the middle of drowning this maid in the kitchen sink, Miss Marple suddenly discovers an affinity for doing impressions of people and does an impression of this woman's dead friend to say, "Why did you kill me, Dottie?" And then the woman breaks down and they're like, "Yes, you did it." And there's a few moments like that where sort of other, often in the Marple characters, in the Marple stories, interestingly. And again, it's about that spirituality, that guilt, that sort of trick, almost sort of tricking people into revealing themselves because the burden of guilt is so strong. Sorry, just rabbiting on there. Christie came to mind.
It's fine. Why you should start a podcast or something? Anyway, so I mean that pretty much brings us to that. That does bring us to the end. I think we've covered it. We leapt ahead to the kind of fun fact that we end on a real haunting after a fake haunting, which I absolutely love. Keeping the supernatural somewhat intangible, but nevertheless present. We've delved into some of the deeper symbolism, the subtext, and of course, all the things that spun off from this film. Like, I think it's underappreciated how influential this is. It was remade directly as a Diabolique with it. I can't say that. Isabella Adjani. You need to warm up before you try some of these names. Isabella Adjani, Sharon Stone. We looked at that. It seems like it's a very watered down, modernized version of the story.
Did they put the lesbians back in?
Not as far as I can tell, but it. I'm very much reminded of The Vanishing. The Vanishing is a incredibly chilling Belgian horror, and it was so successful that it was remade with Jeff Bridges, and it has a wonderful twist ending that is incredibly dark, and they're like, oh, that's such a good ending. Let's change it. We need the audience to come away from this, a little more happy, a little more uplifted, No. So, okay, we are possibly being unfair. We haven't watched the remake, but I believe I saw Mergut saying that it really was not worth it. And I'm going to trust Mergut on this one. Part of the joy of this, as I say, is we can take you back to the original and hopefully get you seeing something you'd have never watched otherwise and finding a bit of appreciation for it and being able to draw a few of the connections from all the films you do know, getting to sort of draw the connections back and seeing where they got some of those ideas from, which I think is a very worthwhile exercise.
Yeah.
I think I'm verging on babbling at this point, so I will probably say let's round it off.
Indeed. Do you want to go first? Oh, no, you don't. I have to go first, don't I?
Yep, we will get the scores from people and thoughts. I think, Slim, you already posted yours. Was it an 8.5 burgers out of 12? I think that was your score, Slim. Waifu, closing thoughts and score, please.
I'd say it's a sort of 7.5 to 8 burgers out of 12. It was good, some good tension, creepy moments with the prosthetic eyes, and God, that final corridor scene. That final corridor scene adds an extra splash of sweet chili sauce and a fried egg. It was, that was really, that was such a camp noise. I suddenly thought Julian Clary was in the room.
Ducky.
Ooh, Ducky. Yeah, so 8, I'll probably round it up to 8. Good. Didn't quite hold me with the tension. I'd spotted the twist coming from a long way off. But, compelling, interesting. And also I enjoyed seeing that kind of, where Psycho got some of his echoes from. So, yeah, it was nice.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. I'm so sure it was 8.5 from Slim. If anyone else wants to get their scores in, and I did say earlier, but I'll just emphasize, they did. Look, Mergut. There you go.
Almost got a Razzie. Good Lord. So bad. 8.5 with extra cheese from Slim.
I'll take that. And we've got an 8, an 8.5, an 8. We've got a 10 from John Garris. Joe with a 9. Slim 8.5. Mergut 9. 7 for 72. Okay, yeah, I'll definitely like it. So I think we're all quite aligned here.
Yeah.
Okay, for me, I did feel the language barrier a bit, but at the same time, it was very fascinating. I still massively felt the benefit of just cultural fascination and historical fascination. I just love seeing the world from that long ago being presented, just not dressed up, not as artifice, not as we're going to take you back to the 1950s, the way the BBC tends to. Don't look into that too much. But just showing it unambiguously. There's
always been here.
There's a little shot I saved. Here we go. There's this little shot here that I thought was so interesting. Just seeing the Paris morgue and how it was set up, I just found it so interesting to see how they ran it. and little bits about what everyone's wearing. It just makes it so much more interesting to me. So I do have a kind of bias, and it does make me always upvote older films, like significantly older. It's just got that extra air of interest. Other than that, I liked how it kept the tension up. We've got a really strong one there, 12 out of 12. Good stuff. I hope you like it when we do the Todd Browning season, J828. Where was I? Very competent thriller, keeps it up. I love the moral aspect. There is very intelligent subtext in the framing of shots. The religious parallel made it extra interesting. And I think the plot is something you can tear apart, not tear apart, you can question on the second run through. When you know everything, you start questioning the story and why go for this particular method. But you also have the benefit of knowing it was all a play and then it becoming much more interesting, like little shots that reveal things more on the second viewing. This is really early on. She runs away, they stay sticking together, and then they realize they need to break up again. The plotters have to separate, but it's revealing stuff like that. So, and it's capped off by really quality horror. I think I'm a bit more generous. I think I lean towards a 9. I was very interested. It's not up there as Psycho. I think Hitchcock obviously looked at this and decided these are the bits I need to strengthen.
Yes.
But I don't want to fault this for that too much. So I think a 9 is fair.
Also, it doesn't have Anthony Perkins.
Yeah, this is where you get a little bit of this sort of culture clash. Like, I was just so much more interested in Anthony Perkins and Martin Balsam.
I'll be honest, I'm mainly interested in him because he's just a very beautiful man. I'm very shallow.
Fair play, fair play. So, very, very strong. I see a few people have mentioned a second watch, and I'm really pleased with that. So, going from about 7, but we have got someone, J828, who that really worked for, and I'm chuffed to hear it. Jay, was this a first watch for you? Was it the first time you'd seen it? I would love to know. Now, I think that is probably where I would leave it. Obviously, I will thank you very much, Waifu. You did very good reading. Very, very good reading of a book. And it may interest you to know, folks, that in December, Waifu is going to do a little stream reading some Christmas ghost stories.
I am indeed.
Yeah.
Fly me with brandy and we'll keep going.
Yes, we'll do it as... Not too much brandy. M.R. James is complex.
A lot of brandy.
And I did see a question that I want to answer there. Where are you, Maverick? Gosh darn.
It was about Christmas horror films.
It was Christmas horror films. I'm trying to find it.
There
we go, Maverick. Sorry, took me a while to find. I don't mind saying. So, guys, what I'm working on at the moment is there is a long video on the Craft Legacy. I'm going to be doing the Christmas special, which you know I try and keep a bit of a surprise about. I think you're really going to like it. The Christmas special is always a lot more sort of madcap and dunking. I just take something that's absolute crap and just go to town on it.
You're not making me sing for this one, are you?
You are not having to sing for this Christmas special.
Thank you.
Probably.
A Christmas miracle.
But we are going to do you reading some M.R. James stories. I think I may have additional streams I'm trying to do, but my main theme for next month is just good fun. I think it's been a heck of a year. I think we're just going to try and have some good fun. So we're going to cover Lost Highway with Harry, which from Lotus Eaters, which I think will be really good fun. We're going to do Plan 9 from Outer Space. I think I was going to do some inside number. Oh, I remember. We're going to do Inside Number 9's Christmas special and Demon Night, Tales from the Crypt. Oh, yeah. And we're going to fit in Violent Night.
Excellent.
David Harbour from Stranger Things, starring as Santa Claus in what looks like Die Hard, set in a family Christmas home. I've seen the trailer. It looks absolutely amazing. We are covering Violent Night. It looks mental. So we're just going to aim for good fun with those. So try and... I see Demon Night is popular. Yep.
Hang on, I think I saw that Jay had replied. Oh, you need to watch it.
Yeah, Jay, you absolutely do, mate. I will accept your 12 out of 12, though. Absolutely. So yeah, Violent Night. Look up the trailer and tell me you don't want to watch it. It's going to be crazy good fun. I'm also hoping, because I wanted to do a Halloween fun stream where we're just going to play a few fun games for an hour. I wanted to do that, but I was sick, so we didn't do it. So I might do a spooky Christmas fun stream. And we'll just try and get loads of people on for that. Those are the December plans. But I think we're going to try and keep ultra efficient and end it here.
Good night, everyone.
Yep. All right. We're rounding it off. Massive thanks to you all. If you're watching on the recap, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you don't mind that we were super efficient this time. We try. This is all banking up goodwill with Super Nanny, because I suspect Lost Highway we might talk a fair bit longer. All right. Lots of love to you all. This has been a really fun stream. Thanks again to Waifu. Really enjoyed your takes in the chat. If you haven't seen it already, watch my video on Get Out and do your homework for next week, which is Possession from 1981 with Sam Neill. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks, Jill. Tschüss.